This is a groundbreaking science looking at how we can solve the problem of early cancer detection screening by using blood.
Blood?
Yeah,
wow.
By using blood.
How do you stay competitive?
So technology is one way, but...
If your leadership style was a drink, what would be in it?
Well, I think we'll have a mix of different... it's got to be a bit of like a cocktail, I think. It's a mix of drinks because we...
How do you manage the remote teams?
So remote teams is down to communication and when to have the communication, how to communicate. Two is...
if you could run the startup today, what would be the three things that you would do differently?
I think learning from experience will definitely lean on to more towards...
If you gave a TED Talk, what would it be about?
I think we will talk about...
Peter, I'm very happy to have you here. Before we begin, perhaps you're pretty famous in Hong Kong, but for all those who are watching from outside of Hong Kong, perhaps you could say a few words of who you are and what you do.
Thank you, Philip. My name is Peter Wong. I'm the CTO of Prenetics. Prenetics is a 10-year-old company based in Hong Kong. We actually looking at solving the sort of health ecosystem questions, delivering products across that spectrum from consumer health, prevention, diagnostic to treatment. And in the consumer health space, we have genetic testing. Circle DNA is one of our core products. Most recently, we're partnered with David Beckham. We co-founded the brand IM8, which actually sells a nutrition supplement drinks, daily ultimate essential, and coupled with our daily ultimate longevity capsule. So the essential drink actually has 92 ingredients that actually helps us to actually go through our day more healthy and stronger. So that's one of the key things we've done. Of course, for people in Hong Kong and maybe in the UK as well, they probably know Prenetics through COVID.
All right.
We've been quite active during the COVID pandemic in helping the UK government and the Hong Kong government to do testing. So we scaled quite a massive operation during that time. In the UK, for example, we helped restart the English Premier League and for their matches for the season. And of course, we then looked at a lot of different industry, helped a lot of different industry in testing, including looking into travel, looking into entertainment, looking into when I say travel, I mean cruise and also airports as well. So that was during the pandemic. But right now, our focus is back into the health ecosystem.
All right.
Yeah. And so back in 2023, one of the things we did is we actually launched a joint venture with Professor Dennis Low, who's really well known for his invention of non-invasive prenatal testing. And we actually partnered with him with a joint venture called Inciter that actually looking at how we can solve the problem of early cancer detection screening.
All right.
Right, by using blood.
Blood?
Yeah,
wow.
By using blood. And this is a groundbreaking science. And actually, at the moment, we are going through the clinical trials. So that's basically what we're looking at in terms of the various different aspects of the health ecosystem.
Is it very efficient and accurate?
Yes, there is a high level of sensitivity and precision as well. Yes.
And when do you think it will be available on the market?
So it's going to take a few years.
All right.
I think the clinical trial, we want to make sure that in terms of what we target, and in terms of where we're at with the product, the science is there. It's been published already. Right now, it's actually just going through trials.
All right.
Yeah.
So you say we, which means the company, but you are the CTO.
Yes.
So how deep into the projects do you go to, and basically what do you do there?
So as a Chief Technology Officer, I look after all aspects of technology, and this means that all the digital solutions within the company I oversee, including going from what the customer experience online through their websites, and then going from that to all the back office systems fulfillment, and then if you're looking at testing, we're looking at the lab, how we actually interact with the sequencer. So when you do DNA testing, we use a next generation sequencing machine to sequence the DNA and then outcome the data. And then of course, when you outcome the data needs to be analyzed. Then again, we have to look at the bioinformatics algorithm and the pipeline, and then of course the hardware to support that type of computation, because it's actually a large amount of data. We're talking about terabytes of data coming out every sequence, every sequencing run, and so that's a lot of data to manage as well. Then going from that is, so there's a customer experience, and then there is the lab operation, and then there is also looking into product development, looking into helping with business intelligence, for example, all the way into looking at how we can. So I was talking about this joint venture. One of the things we're looking at is how we can add AI into the solution as well. So that's another aspect we're looking at. In fact, we're looking at adding AI into different aspects of our product. Circle DNA is something we're actually also looking into as well, how we can make the big test more, provide more insight than it already has.
Well, I think AI will be eventually in every product that you have, right? Except for the capsules. You used to be a programmer, and then you jumped into more overseeing projects.
You can say that. I am still at heart a programmer.
Oh.
Yes. I still like to get my hands dirty. It's one of the things that in my organization, I want everyone to be able to experience and to understand how things work, right? And how things work, because it gives you the idea of, you can understand a bit more about the impact if you know how things work. And so that's what I ask of myself and also of my team. Obviously, if you work in a department, working in a team, everyone has their speciality, have their special skills. Someone's good at some skills, someone's better than others. That's why you form a team. But at the end of the day, when I organize the teams together, it tends to be the ways of I do not limit on their role. I.e., if you're good at, say, working on building a mobile app, you can build a mobile app, but you can also do other things if you have the curiosity. And we're trying to make the technology as seamless as possible to allow that to happen.
In a way, you are a company which has developed product because it's been there for 10 years, but at the same time, you are a kind of a startup for other products or ventures, right?
Yes. We actually operate quite uniquely in the sense that every single product launch, we treat it like a startup. What I mean by startup, it means that we have to be very agile. And we often, when we launch a product, we form a small teams and a core nucleus team to work on delivering that push, right? And when we launch these products, we often need to get feedback from customers. For example, we launched a website for our IM8 brand last month. And one of the key things that we've been focusing on is actually getting some feedback from customers on their user journey, right? I say they get a product, they get a subscription product, they get their user feedback in terms of shipping time, getting user experience in terms of if they see the product, they give feedback to us in terms of the quality of the product, in terms of the packaging. So everything that, we take that on a daily basis and see what we can do to improve. Because it's quite interesting that in our space, a lot of the things that we look at is, at the end of the day, is still customer driven, very much customer driven. And including also in DNA tests. So if you look at Circle DNA, our product, yes, there is a lot of science behind it, and we are actually, everything we do is backed by science, backed by literature. But then how do you turn those information into customer-friendly, consumer-friendly, so that they understand what they're reading, what the results mean? And then we, of course, provide a lot of customer support should they have questions about the results. We actually have scientists actually backed our customer support to provide actually understanding of why certain things look certain ways in the results.
So, but now you have David Beckham, right? So in a way, it is a marketing in itself. So you do not need to do any marketing other than having him together.
Not so much. Not so much. I mean, he's obviously a very important part of this journey. But I think one of the key things is, in our mindset is actually getting this product to as many people as possible, so that they can benefit from the product, and of course we get feedback, and that could be through number of different ways, different channels, and through different through the eyes of different individuals, right? Could be through medical professional, could be through sports professionals, and could be through other more individuals who knows a bit more about nutrition, for example, within the medical space, for example, in a scientific way. So these are kind of full spectrum of if you will, team members that we have in our team. And to add to that, the product is also backed by actually a very strong scientific advisory board. One of the individuals on that, for example, is Dr. James Green, who is the former chief scientist of NASA. So one of the key things that we've done recently is actually taking an experiment to a microgravity environment by sending it up to space.
Wow.
Yeah. So we want to actually, under microgravity environment, actually, some of the biological process actually speeds up, and that allows us to study the effects of our formula better.
It sounds very interesting that you actually go beyond the Earth. And I think it's very difficult right now on Earth to choose the products that you offer, because I know there's a few DNA testing services or products. I know there is multiple nutritious supplements offerings. And what would be your advice to the customer to choose correctly?
So in terms of DNA tests, what we have right now at Circle DNA is we're using a technology that majority of the DNA tests in the market they simply do not use.
All right.
We use a clinical grade next generation sequencing. It's a little bit more expensive, but it's a lot more accurate in some of the categories of results within DNA tests. For example, in cancer screening, in carrier screening, when say to see whether the individual is a carrier of a disease, which is quite important when you plan to have a family, for example. The traditional method in DNA tests in the market, consumer DNA tests, uses a technology called microarray, and that's actually it's just there's a lot fewer data points than sequencing. It's two separate technology.
Okay.
And so they wouldn't be able to provide that type of advice or scientific details to the customer or information.
So that difference in price actually justifies the results.
Yes, exactly. Yes.
Okay. And is it really? I don't know much about DNA testing other than, okay, once I get the results, I know that I will be healthier, live longer. Is that true?
The DNA test result is the DNA we test is called germline DNA. These are inherited DNA, and it tells you the risk, your lifetime risk of certain things, or how your DNA mutation might have you effect on how you react to certain certain nutrients, certain drugs, and it even goes into whether you are more suitable in certain type of sports, in terms of endurance-based or strength-based, for example.
Oh, that's interesting.
This actually is quite true. We actually had an Olympic athlete taken a DNA test before, and to realize he, rather than he's a 400-meter sprinter, but instead of actually realizing, so as being a 400-meter sprinter is actually quite interesting. There are two different ways to train. You can either train for speed or endurance.
Okay.
Yeah, and most in terms of the type of training, how you train, and I think most of the athletes trained one way, but he turns out he actually needs to train the other way because and he didn't know why until he found out, because his DNA actually suggests that that's actually, the mutation suggests that that's actually more suitable for him. So kind of you have this kind of information as well for the individual. It does tell you what you should be doing, what could affect your health. It does tell you if you have certain predisposition or high risk in disease. For example, there are certain genetic mutation that causes a much higher risk of breast cancer, for example.
Right.
And so those are the things that would tell the individual what to do. If they found out early, then the chances of survival is much higher.
So you mentioned AI. How does AI help you in your work?
So AI helps us. So there's obviously we have built machine learning models to help us with some of the analysis and research study, but that's the science bit. Actually, AI helps us across the board in our company, right? Going from your day-to-day work to actually generating the kind of content you need for. So if let's say you write a piece of content, you can have it generated first, and then you go through it,
right,
and see if it makes sense. So that's quite clear. In engineering, we use it to generate code.
True.
And that's not say you just generate and run it. You generate it, and then you have to review it. You have to test it. Right. So you still have to go through the change control process to make sure that you're not going to push anything, not going to break anything, and it's accurate. And because we are actually still very much care about customer information, the security of it, the privacy of it, right? And so everything we provide still needs to be very accurate, even in the presence of AI. And so that doesn't change.
Of course.
Right. And so it means that what's important is people need to be aware of this, because quite often, if you don't know how AI can play into your day-to-day, you might misuse it if you're not careful, thinking you can just generate something and trust it or something. There are many occasions where it generates something incorrect, and we will have to correct it or prompt it differently. So that's what we do. But at the same time, of course, in our other departments, we also have employees using it for other day-to-day tasks. We actually held a workshop, a company-wide workshop. I ran this workshop with the company, where again, it's the engineering of me actually not only go through how to use AI, but actually show them what AI is. Right, and what makes something AI or machine learning versus something that is just analytics.
Right.
And how can you run AI? Because it's a bit of a black box for everyone, but you can actually run AI on your laptop.
You can, yes.
You can, just a bog standard laptop. You can run it. It's just very slow, but there's nothing stopping you from running.
Well, and it's got fewer options to think through, right?
Yeah. Exactly. I mean, right now we have these large language models, right, that people can run, and of course it takes a lot of compute power to run those models. But you can actually build a very small one.
Well, you can use it on your Samsung phone, right?
Exactly. So that's why, but that information is not so available. It is available, but people might not know these kind of, and they don't see the what's really behind it, and the architecture behind this, and what is it actually doing.
Right, okay.
Yeah.
I understand. But and obviously you have a lot of concerns with security and data, or let's say segmentation and privacy, right?
Yes. And I mean, it's the same as what you put into a search engine. Pretty much the same what you put into the search engine. I think the difference, of course, is that, again, boils down to awareness, right? Boils down to what they know they should be entering onto the internet, what they shouldn't be putting into the internet.
Well, yeah, but then you train your data on the medical data. Or you train the models.
That's a closed model, yeah.
That's a closed model.
That's a closed model.
Okay. It should be. Well, it should be and not. I mean, this is like disputable, right? Because if you, across the world, if you wanted to have better effects, then you probably could open it and share with others, but then the privacy issues are.
But then also you could anonymize, or you would anonymize it before you make it shareable in any ways, if it's even shareable.
Okay.
Right.
All right. Okay. So you can anonymize it, depending on the jurisdiction. I guess they would allow you or not to share it with others.
Because you still need a consent, right?
Right.
Definitely.
You love programming, but then at the same time you're a CTO, which means you have to be a leader. How would you describe your leadership style?
I think my leadership style is being transparent. And being transparent means that it's a both-way conversation. whenever there is a piece of work that needs to be done, I always give reasons of why and the impact. I think the communication is very important when you work with a team, especially if you're getting information might not be the first-hand information, and that's often the case because you can't have everyone to be in every places all the time.
Right.
So sometimes you get second-hand information. Then it becomes important to communicate even more clearly, and that also goes if you have a remote office. If your team sitting in a remote office, then it's even more important to communicate to the nth degree.
So then you kind of busted the myth of an IT person being very closed and focused on the computer. You actually have to be an outgoing person.
Oh, well, outgoing person, perhaps. I think more important is having the communication to understand. Say if our stakeholders has a requirement coming through, has an ask, then we need to understand. Well, as much as we can, try to understand why we need this, and in most cases, people do provide it if you ask.
Yeah,
people do tell you why they need it, these certain things.
What one skill would you say is underrated in your role?
One skills, I think communication is actually one thing I think is underrated in the sense that quite often in the technical field, many people will think about technical skills being very important. It is important. Domain knowledge is important, but those are skills that can be learned, but at the same time, they can go out of date.
Okay.
Communication, on the other hand, is something that is transferable. It's something that you need no matter what you do. So being able to communicate. And a lot of the projects, for example, not just technical projects, but if you think about digital transformation as a type of project, we've been doing this digital transformation types project for a while now, for ourselves and also for our subsidiaries. And what I've learned is that it is actually the digital part is an enabler.
Right.
Actually, what's more important is the communication, is the story, is the narrative. Everyone needs to. You need to get people to understand why is it done and what's in it for them, and what so they can contribute also. So otherwise, it's not a one-way conversation, and it goes well. It's the same if you work in a team. If you be open and transparent to your team members as much as you can, and they can see that, and then they hopefully they will feel I am also open to feedback.
Yeah.
Because quite often people are not very willing to give feedback, upward feedback especially.
So now we are entering a very interesting zone because you are working for a Hong Kongese company.
Yes.
And traditionally, Hong Kongese companies are not at all in this model that you are describing, right?
Yeah.
It's usually the authoritarian style. So did it come naturally in the company, or was it a transformation at some point, or is it composed of people who actually think that way and not the old way?
I think it's more gradual. I wouldn't say everyone can adapt into that mode. For example, remember, I joined the company for about nearly 8 years now.
Okay.
When I first arrived, I think first 2 months after I arrived, we decided to do 365 feedback. So having that all-round feedback, that didn't exist before. So again, it's a concept that is quite relevant and interesting because you're not just getting your manager's feedback, you're actually getting everyone else you're working with to see how you can actually improve as an individual.
All right. Well, that consumes a lot of time, no?
So then we limit the number of people within that 365, so that we don't ask 10 people trying to give feedback to one person, for example.
Oh, okay. So you have structured it.
Yes.
In a way.
Yes.
So in your business, how do you stay competitive?
I think so. Technology is one way, but actually more importantly, again, is looking at the customer feedback. Okay. Yeah, customer feedback is still the number one most important thing, especially in consumer health. Obviously, if you're talking about diagnostic, if you're talking about the diagnostic piece, then a lot of it is in science, in research. looking at what's in the market, looking at what the science, with the forefront of science, scientific research. But when by the time you commercialize a really scientific product, you still need to get feedback from customer. Now, when I say customer, I don't necessarily mean customers who are clicking on the website.
Oh.
So one of the products, one of the subsidiary we have, look at cancer diagnostic. What they do is they actually profile cancer tumor. Mm-hmm. So for cancer patient, the doctors can recommend them to do a DNA test on the cancer cells. So they will take a tissue biopsy, and then that will get analyzed in a lab. That result would then tells them, so this is different types of DNA analysis than circDNA. Mm-hmm. This is looking at something called somatic DNA. That DNA actually changes over time. And actually, a cancer tumor is a change of DNA.
Right, okay.
And so if we know what mutation caused that cancer, some mutation can actually, there's already research on specific drugs can actually help to get rid of the cancer. So that's why the DNA test happens, to know whether it is that mutation. Okay. But of course, the whole spectrum of that, what I just talked about, there's a whole workflow to it. How does the hospital give the sample? How do we tell them whether we received the sample? How do we know when the reports are ready? How do we send the reports to the hospital and get it interpreted, and whether the report has all the relevant information the doctors need, right? So all of that is customer feedback, right? Again, still, it's like the doctors will give feedback like, can we have the report in a different language, or the report in adding more the reference in this X, Y, and Z, for example. So things like that we will still need to understand. So everything we do is based on that, right? I think that's what's going to keep us keep us at the front.
Well, I would argue that everybody believes the same, right? To be listening to customers' feedback. It's just probably the execution later on.
Yes, execution.
But at the same time, I would like to ask, if you were to advise a startup on where to draw the borderline between MVP and reiteration between MVP and what they think the MVP should be, right? Because MVP should be the MVP, minimum valuable product. But then people may think, okay, I still want to add this feature and this feature and this feature before I release it to the first customers. So is there any formula or your own idea on how to limit yourself from adding before you actually launch?
I would say we tend not to add a lot of things before we launch. As I said, again, to iterate, we get the feedback and then we iterate on it. I think that's actually most important. But at the time, it depends on the type of launch and what other things we have to line up for the launch. Okay. Then kind of drives what needs to be in that delivery, right? I think that's quite important. But you're right. One thing is quite important. Getting the feedback is important, but at the same time, you mentioned about execution, right? All right. One thing that I need to stress is and it's quite I wouldn't say quite unique, but quite fortunate working in an organization where it's really much focused on execution as well. So that's kind of the other side of the coin, if you will.
If somebody fears that their MVP is too minimal, then would you suggest, okay, forget it, just do it, or?
I wouldn't say anything is too minimal. You have to do some market research to see what are things out there. And then have a goal, right? If you launch something, what do you expect to happen within week 1, within week 2? It might be the case that you launch something. So let's say we launch a feature. It could be the case that the feature actually didn't work. You have to roll it back. You have to do that quick. Or you have to make adjustment. You have to do it quick. So I think in terms of lowering an MVPL, it's quite important that we keep a constant tab on how it performs, right?
So that's a very interesting point, to actually start thinking about what you want to achieve with the MVP and what you want to measure later once it's released, right? Not just release it and see what happens.
Exactly.
If you could radically change something in the industry, what a radical change would you implement tomorrow?
Tomorrow, I think the most important thing is actually getting the regulations and the data interoperability work in a better way. Right now, if you look at in the industry, the data exchange, coupled with regulations and compliance, is actually very difficult to collaborate between organizations in the industry. What we can share, how we share, there's no standard way to actually store any. The data is not that dissimilar across the industry when you think about it.
Right.
And yet there's so many different ways to record this data and store it in very different ways. But I think, of course, you need to have the proper consent, you have the proper security in place. But on top of that, the other way to advance the industry is to have that data available for research, right, for research and development.
Do you think it will change?
We like to think so, and I think that's something is possible. But like any industry, which the health industry existed for a very long time, and it takes time for organization to actually see the benefit, not to see the benefit, but to adapt where there is a more common interface between organizations.
If your leadership style was a drink, what would be in it? You said transparency. What else?
It's got to be, so the drink needs to be transparent. I
Vodka.
think vodka, yes, but I think we'll have a mix of different. It's got to be a bit of like a cocktail. I think it's a mix of drinks because I value a diverse team, and it needs to be collaborative. So it's definitely a drink where we're going to throw in different flavors to it, and it's got to be strong because it needs to have an oomph to the taste, I think.
So is your team diverse?
Yes, yes. Over the course of my career, I've always had teams from all over the world, remote teams, local teams, and it helps me as a person to grow as well, to understand different culture, different ways of working as well.
How do you manage the remote teams? I do find it's challenging, so I'm always interested in how people do it.
So remote teams, it's down to communication and when to have the communication, how to communicate. Two is there is actually, regardless of whether it's local or remote, you need to give the same amount of trust. Right. So and one thing also, back to communication, quite often we see this, and this is something I experienced earlier in my earlier times as well, is let's say you have a team members remotely, and let's say we are all in equal, well, we work in the same team, but you and I are local, co-located in the same place, and then we decide to have a meeting, and then you and I will be in the meeting, we're talking face to face, and this other individual will be through a video.
Right.
So that's not actually good for the individual on the video because they often get neglected and you're often just talking. So sometimes what we might do is actually let's join online regardless of whether you're local or remote. So everyone's the same.
I still think that it would be more efficient to have half people online, half people offline.
For the work, it potentially could be, depends on the work. But for the people on the remote, not as good.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
You mentioned trust. I always love that trust does not exist in the business dictionary. How do you trust, or how do you build trust with your teams?
So for one thing is, and this is I learned through my career before. So I did some military training before as a youngster. And one thing that in leadership training during that time is that you don't ask your team members to do things that you wouldn't do. You do yourself. So that's one thing and hence I'm asking everyone to be hands-on in the team as well, so that they see me doing it, and then when I ask them to do it, they see that, even though I'm not as good, maybe I'm not as good, but that doesn't matter. At least I can demonstrate that I'm willing to put in the effort as well, and then team member will be able to see that. At the same time is allowing feedback on both ways. And I think once we break that barrier, then it's easy, then the trust it's easier to grow. You should earn, it's earned, right? So you have to be very transparent and honest when things work or when things doesn't work, right? You need to be on both sides as well. But when things work, then you need to explain, or congratulate and say this is good, but how it can be improved, right? And when things doesn't work, then you say why it's okay, but why it doesn't work, and how it can be, mitigate, how this issue can mitigate. Root cause analysis is actually one thing we do a lot in technology, because we operate on systems, and so quite often, sometimes things don't work the way that they're supposed to, and we will then have to take time to understand what caused it. Sometimes it's not very clear, but I always ask my team member to be transparent and actually do root cause analysis and show evidence what happened.
Okay.
And then you have to build systems to allow that to happen as well. Not every system allows you to do this kind of analysis. And the other thing that we would do in terms of team, operate as a team, is that we be a bit more data driven. So then you don't have to take my word for it because the data shows itself.
Do you develop everything in-house?
Most of it. Some of it we do now use more SaaS platforms, SaaS offerings. But by and large, a lot of the work is still built in-house, yes.
So would you call yourself a tech company or a medical company?
Medical tech company.
Okay. What is a completely unproductive habit that you enjoy?
I guess it can be unproductive. I listen a lot on podcasts, on interviews.
Okay.
Interviews and also histories. So I like listening about this. There's something about this. It's quite soothing listening to those to interviews or someone talking about an event in the past and things like that. It takes a lot of time, but I'm not sure. So I'm not sure. I mean, perhaps if I don't listen to those, then maybe I can be more productive. Perhaps.
If you gave a TED talk, what would it be about?
I think we will talk about being adaptive and being resilient to change. I think that's quite a concept that, throughout my life, throughout my experience, my career, this has been a very important aspect. So I'm an individual who likes to try different things, and not everything works out the way they should be. But you just keep going. You just keep going because that is you got to go through. And that's part of how myself define life is actually through those experiences.
If you could run the startup today, what would be the three things that you would do differently?
3 things to do differently. I think learning from experience will definitely lean on to more towards automation. I think that's quite important. We'll focus a lot more on before we were trying to focus on the team building part, but I think right now it's come to a point where with technology in place, it's actually more important to get a very small team that can communicate very well, that can actually drive those product launch and drive those change. And so I think that's quite important. So if with the right technology, you don't actually need that many people to get something out the door.
So you don't need team because the team is gone because of the technology and AI.
You still need some people, but maybe not that many. Maybe you can you could in theory start something on your own, just solo.
Right.
That is possible. But if you have, say, a co-founder, it does help to get that brainstorm and get that idea.
The dynamics is different.
Exactly.
So how about the company culture? Are you a strong believer in it, or do you think that just money solves everything and you pay the salary and people are happy?
I think it's important that people understand in the company how they should interact in a way that if you are open and transparent, then you want everyone else to be the same. If you want feedback, then you want everyone to be able to provide feedback. Not everyone shy away, because then by everyone contributing, giving ideas, positive, and so positive idea is a good idea. If it's not positive, then it needs to be constructive, right? And the question is then, not everyone knows that, and not everyone is comfortable to do that. And so I think building a company culture to allow that to happen is very important.
All right, so it's not about pool table or sleeping bag in the office, it's more about transparency in your opinion, right?
Yeah, in my opinion, yes, communication and transparency is still the key in anything that we do. I think especially if let's say you allocate a piece of work or someone's picking up a piece of work to do, but they're struggling, but they worried and they don't want to say anything. Actually, that doesn't get us anywhere.
Yeah, true.
Right. So I've seen a lot. I've seen this happening because maybe there are certain expectations not being managed. The individual will think, oh, if I say this, and what happened? I need to, or they assume that they have to solve everything themselves.
Okay.
But that actually, more often than not, that happens. More often, like individual feels that it's their responsibility to solve that problem, and so they don't want to bother myself or their teammates.
Thank you very much. It was such a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you, Philip.
And your answers are quite unique and quite inspiring. So thank you very much, and maybe one day we will have another chance to talk.
Yeah, definitely. Yes. Thank you.